Hi YouTube! This video will show you how to change the front sprocket on your Suzuki TU250X. Alright, well, this works on just about any chain-driven motorcycle. There will be a few differences, but for the most part it's the same procedure. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the 7mm bolts that hold the sprocket cover in place. There are 3 bolts and each bolt is a different length. Try to remember which bolt goes to which hole so that reassembly will be easier. Place them out of the way of your work area and then remove the cover. The next thing we're going to do is bend the locking washer flat. Now here it is in blue from the factory. We're going to use our chisel and hammer and gently pry it back away from the nut until it's flattened out of the way so that we can turn the nut. Once we do that, we're going to slip our breaker bar with our 30mm socket onto the nut and loosen it up. I did this by standing on the rear brake pedal to prevent it from turning. I was holding the bike up off the kickstand just in case it decided to slip forward. That way the kickstand wouldn't fold up and it wouldn't fall over. You may want an assistant to hold it for you and do all that while you put torque on it. That was a very satisfying pop when that finally went. So I removed the nut and washer before remembering that I wasn't done with the chain. So back on it goes, but loosely this time. Now we need to loosen the rear axle so that we can put some slack into the chain. The axle is just a big bolt, and all we're going to do is remove the nut on the right side. It's a 19mm nut. Once we get that loose, then we're going to adjust the chain adjusters. And we do that with our 12mm wrenches by holding the bolt in place and loosening the locking nut that's on the bolt. And then we just slide it back out of the way so that we can adjust the bolt later. And then do the same on both sides, again making sure not to turn the bolts. So now that we've moved the axle forward and we've added some slack to the chain, we can simply remove the chain from the front sprocket and slide it off the shaft. Now this is the OEM 15-tooth sprocket. It's marked 15T. And I'm replacing it with a 16-tooth sprocket, and of course this is marked 16T. Now is a good time to clean all the grit and grime that is collected behind the sprocket cover. We'll simply place the new sprocket on the shaft. Okay, that's clean enough. Come on. Yeah, okay. Now that's enough. Alright, so we're going to put the sprocket on the shaft. Just slip it in the chain there, and just slide it right on. Okay, just slide it right on. It'll go right on. Oh, yeah. Make sure the transmission's in neutral so you can just kind of spin the splines so that they'll actually match up to your new sprocket. Yeah, that way you don't spend 10 minutes trying to figure out why your new sprocket doesn't fit. Wow, look at all that slack. Yeah, we're going to take care of that in a minute. First we're going to put this washer and nut back on. So we already bent that washer back at one point. We want to bend it in another position. So put the bent part out of the way and then tighten your nut back down on there by hand. So we're going to need to look up the actual torque value from the factory service manual. I just looked it up on the internet on Adventure Rider. It looks like 65 pound-feet is what we're going for here. So I'll set my torque wrench and then we'll tighten it in the same way that we loosened it. Standing on the brake, clicking it around. And that means that it is set at 65. Oh hey, see all that flex? That's the cush drive. There's actually a bunch of rubber in there. Pretty typical for street bikes with a chain. Okay, now we're going to bend the tab back down on the nut. This is, again, a new surface. If we go 1/3 of the way around, as in 2 flat spots over in either direction, then we can get one more bend out of this thing and still have fresh metal for the bend. Some people decide to bend the washer on all 6 sides before they get rid of it. I think washers are pretty cheap and it's not really worth it. So we're going to make sure that's flat all the way across. And we're using very simple taps. Very light taps. I don't want to cause any damage to the transmission here. I just want to flatten out that washer. Alright, now that it's completely flat, we can lube up the chain a little bit. We're putting fresh metal in there, might as well add a little lube. Oh, and we still got to clean out some more grit from the cover. So, alright, that's enough. Alright, Yeah, okay. So now remember those 3 bolts and where they went because they were all different? Yep, just put them back in and tighten them down. And be very gentle tightening these down because these are stainless steel nuts and they're going into an aluminum engine casing. And if you strip out the threads from the engine casing, you're going to have a bad time. So just be gentle. Alright, now we need to tension up the chain. And this is the way I prefer to do it. I've got a long mark where my main chain tension is, and then I have my maximum and minimum marked on there. That way I don't have to do any calculations in my head. And I hold it up against the tire so it doesn't move, and then I simply move the chain up and down against it to see if I'm anywhere within that realm. And I'm nowhere close to it, of course. We haven't adjusted anything yet. So I'm going to start tightening it down by turning the adjustment bolts clockwise, and I'm turning them at the same time on both sides so it stays nice and even. And check it again, and still nowhere close. Yeah, I'm going way up above there. It's almost twice as much tension as twice as much slack as we need. So again, turning it 180 degrees at a time on both sides just to make sure I'm nice and even. Third of a turn at a time, whatever it takes to slowly move in until you get it just right. And once you do, just slide up those little locking nuts, and then we're going to tighten those back up again while holding the bolts in place. We don't want to move the bolts again now that we've gotten them where we want them. We just want to snug up the nuts. Now my lovely assistant comes in, sits on the bike for me, and I'm going to shake the bike a little bit to try to get the axle fully mated up against the frame there. I want to make sure it's straight and that the bolts for the tensioner are up against the frame. And then I tighten down the bolt, and that's it.